actually, you can't hear me. Can you? No, you can't hear me. There we go. Now you can hear me. How about that? I think, yes, you should be able to hear me. That's good. Okay, so welcome to today's live, today's LinkedIn Live. We're going to be talking about execution today, how to execute OKRs, and I've got my sort of 5-step framework that I wanted to talk through. If you would like to jump on a if you'd like to, no, just checking that I'm actually alive, seeing if it works. Yes, it's working. Good. If you would like to jump on and put a comment down, please put a comment down. Feel free to ask any questions. With a little bit of luck, I'll see them live. I'm not 100% convinced by my technology here as to whether I can actually see these things as live as I want to, but I should be able to see comments from LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. So if you're on YouTube or LinkedIn or Twitter, you should be able to add a comment. So feel free to do so. But anyway, it's nice to have you all here, whoever's watching. Usually we've got a handful of people. Feel free to add questions. There will be a replay of this later on available on LinkedIn and YouTube as well. So don't worry about that if you're missing it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a presentation. I normally do interviews on these things. And if you think that, in fact, to be fair, if you think of someone who I should interview, please let me know. If you'd like to be interviewed on this session, please let me know. I'm quite keen to interview 2 main types of people. One is leaders, whether they're CEOs or senior executives of growth stage startups, just to understand, what it is that they're doing, how they're working, sharing their stories about success and failure and learning from them. And I think that could be interesting to people. So if you know somebody like that who you think would be interesting to interview on this session, please pass them through to me. Please let me know. The other type of person I like to interview is people who are similar to me. They serve this kind of market. Now, I've interviewed in the past, actually I'm going to take this jump off, it's a bit warm. I've interviewed in the past a few people. I've interviewed Amanda Kolpois, who's a agile business coach. She helps agile business consultant. She helps businesses become more agile, so not just engineering, but businesses. I've interviewed Janie Links. She's an expert in human resources and how people growth can occur. I've interviewed Christian Michio, who is a product leadership consultant. He helps product teams set things up well. And I've been interviewed by Alan Boyle, so that's kind of like a reverse interview. Been interviewed by Alan Boyle, who is helping people to onboard, helping with onboarding when you're growing. But anyone who's in that space, happy. I've interviewed a few more people as well. I've interviewed Jonathan Bullock, JB, who is a COO and a chief of staff. And in fact, I've interviewed Dora Nudge as well, Nagy, Nagy, but I think it is Hungarian. I think you say Nud, but it's very difficult for non-Hungarians to say the GY in Hungarian. So. She's our chief of staff. So I interviewed a few people there, and they're interesting. They're all available in the past. I have a feeling that I've missed someone. I'm sure I have, in fact. But whoever you are there, have a look at my list. They're there. They're on the podcasts as well. They're on YouTube. They're available. So if you'd like to review them, feel free, have a look. And if you have any ideas of other people I should interview, or you would like to be interviewed, let me know if you think this is interesting to people who watch this. So let's get on with this. Let's get into what we're going to do here. Now, I've got a screen share that should just work. Oh, it's interesting. It's doing a background. Is that working the way I want it to? It's doing it slightly strangely. I've got something in the background there. I don't know why. Zoom to current window. Don't know why, but I've got something in the background of that window. So I don't know why that is. Doesn't matter. Let's go on with it. So this is me. I help with objectives and key results, and we're going to get on with how we execute. So the situation here is that you have set up a set of OKRs. You have, you can't see that. I'm going to move myself over here. Let's move myself up there. Right, so you've set up OKRs at this stage, you've been given OKRs, and you need to execute now. So that's the next step. You've got your OKRs. The OKRs aren't going to do the work themselves. Setting great OKRs. That's interesting. I didn't realize it would do that. I know what I need to do. I've got the wrong, I see what's happening here. I've got the wrong setup in here. Let's try this. If I go back to here because I don't want to, Microsoft PowerPoint slideshow. There it is. So that should now just show the document that I want to share. That's better. Okay. So you're in the situation, you've got OKRs. Now you may be a CEO, you may be a leader, you may have set your OKRs. You may not have been involved in setting the OKRs. Someone else may have set them, and you now are responsible for executing part of them. whatever it is, this is where the real work happens. You can't set and forget. OKRs are not going to do the work on their own. You have to lead the team to make sure it really happens. And that's why executives and chief executive officers have the word executive in them. It's because it's all about execution. That's what executive is all about, right? This microphone is kind of big and in the way of my drinking of water. So basically, I've got a 5-step process to making this work. And this doesn't really matter where you are in the organization. You could be, by the way, as I say, the executive or a CEO. You could be given them by someone else. You could be set OKRs. You might even be an owner of OKRs who doesn't have a team, like a product manager, where you set the OKRs for your product and you need to engage various teams in doing this. This process will work for everyone. So the process is basically this. Let's pull this back up on screen again. Your process is basically this. Number one, you do a plan, make the plan for how you're going to attack this. Now, if you're an agile type person, and I believe in agile, I think agile is great. I think it's the only way of executing things, getting things done. Some people tend to respond to this, oh, we don't plan, we're agile. And obviously, if you really know agile, you know agile does involve planning. The purpose of the plan is you put together a plan for the quarter, and it's not a blueprint. It's not something that you're going to be held to and go through and make sure, are we delivering according to the plan? It's just, what am I going to do? It's not a blueprint. It's a plan, right? I may have another word for that somewhere, but it's a plan. So you want to go through and do this plan. And this enables you to be agile, because once you know what you're trying to do, you can then look at what's changed and what's different and what you've learned and what's new, how you're diverging from what you thought you were going to do. And then you can make changes. And that's how you become agile, by knowing what you're trying to achieve and then changing it. So this is why the plan can't be a blueprint. The second step is you review the plan. You review this plan with your colleagues, or you socialize it with peers and with up and down and your team and everywhere else. And this is part of the process of developing the plan, but I separate this into 2 steps. The third thing is you do a weekly meeting and you create momentum and you course correct with this. You're using the plan, looking at what's happening and then creating momentum around it and making sure we're going in the right direction, and you course correct. You edit and change the plan as you go. Then you do a weekly review at the end of the week, and you're capturing the problems and the wins so that you know what you're doing next week to set yourself up for the following week. It's a review of how did this work go? Maybe you do a retrospective. And then you do some weekly recognition, and your recognition is basically celebrating wins, but you also want to share some learnings as well, to feed the brains for the next week. Okay, so let's get on with this. By the way, the animations on this might not be quite how I would have preferred. I've set this up without really reviewing animations, so if I have weird animations, I'm sorry. The basics, the plan, the secret for plan, the thing about planning is that, and I guess the secret that I want to tell you is that planning is not my strength. I'm not a great planner. I've never been a great planner, and I struggle with it. Now that self-talk isn't really helpful for me, so I don't tend to talk about it much, but my natural approach to planning is somewhere between the cowboy and the perfectionist. Now what I mean by that is the cowboy approach is that someone asks me about what my plan is, and I'm quite good at improvising and thinking on my feet. So someone asks me and I improvise, and I generally convince them that I have a plan. I just haven't got it written down, or I'm not showing them, I'm just talking about it. And I'm so familiar with it, I can talk about it. But actually what's happened is I've just made it up. And if they ask me again in another week, I'd probably make something different up. So in reality, my plan's not, when I do cowboy style, my plan's not particularly well thought through. I can't use it as a basis for change. It satisfies some things, but I can't use it as a basis for change. And I can't really share it with anyone, so it's of little value. The other type of thing that I tend to do is I tend to be a perfectionist, and I tend to go down the path of either, if I'm not going to do the cowboy thing, if I start writing down a plan, my natural way is to write this detailed plan with all eventualities and decisions, and going down all the path of how many days and hours and weeks should this take, and I get all the estimates completely wrong. But I mean, I can't help myself but go to this level of detail, and then I have about 7 pages in, I'm 10% of the way through what I'm planning, and I give up, right? If I do finish, it's just too heavy and too detailed to be of much use. No one else is going to read it. And I end up improvising instead, because it's too hard to change. So it's not really a basis for change. It doesn't really add value. So this approach is not a great approach. So the secret that I've learned of how to do planning well is, there's a few secrets here. Number one secret is just write a plan that's no more than 1 page long and takes you no more than 1 hour, and then go to the next step, which is the review, right? Now, the purpose of this is really, the other 3 are really sort of fundamentally related to that. You don't have to stick strictly to 1 page. No point in editing things down to make it 1 page. It goes to 1.5, whatever. Try and just keep it to about that long, right? Try and keep it short. Try and keep it within an hour. Just spend an hour on it, put it together, and then start reviewing. Go into step 2. Now, what you need to do then is treat your plan like a straw man. The straw man is something that you build out of straw, like a man, like a scarecrow out of straw, but it's like as a reference to some sort of religious ceremony. But basically, they used to build these straw men and then tear them apart, and that was the ritual, was tearing the straw man apart. And what you're doing when you're building a straw man document or a straw man plan is you're building this plan and then you're reviewing it with people with the purpose of tearing it apart. That's the goal, right? You want to tear it apart, and so you can build something better. It's a starting point. The next thing is to treat it as something that I'm learning as I'm going. I'm not an expert at planning. That's fine. I don't need to be an expert at planning. I need to be an expert at doing my job. And planning is part of the job, but it's only one part of it, right? So if we're learning as we're going, we just sort of, let's get something there and it might be wrong. Let's just learn. Let's take the review and learn from the review. And finally, recognize that the plan is not a blueprint. It's a basis for change. It's not something that we're writing down, this is what we are going to do with 100% confidence. It's like, this is what it looks like we should be doing. This is how I think we should be doing things. And this is where I think the problems are likely to be. And this is what we're going to do about them, right? So now just go into a bit more detail on this, what the plan should look like. When you have, one of the things you need to think about here is before you do this, is the scope. What's the scope of the thing you're planning? Now, there are two basic ideas that I think about with scope. One is and you can set this in the title, just have a title to make sure that your title says what the scope is so people know what the scope of this plan is, right? But maybe you're a functional leader or a team leader, you have a team, and what you're really trying to do with this plan is make sure you're allocating your resources correctly and delivering what's needed and what's expected, like you're saying what you're going to deliver. That's the way you organize this. So you organize this by making sure you're trying to cover all of the major activities people are doing, not just OKRs, but also your business as usual, any KPIs you're managing, any projects you have to deliver, if you have sales or quota work or whatever else, just make sure you just put that in there, and you can write this down. You don't have to have it in a really fun, it doesn't have to be structured in any particular way, just make sure it's there. The second type of plan is really for like a CEO or a cross-functional leader or a product manager, particularly where you're trying to deliver OKRs and there is a cross-functional team that you may or may not be responsible for. What you're trying to do is meet the OKRs, like deliver the OKRs and manage other work, and specifically secure resources, right? So what you're trying to do is make sure that the people who need to deliver these things are going to do the things that they need to deliver, and they have got a plan. So you're more compiling other people's plans here. These two types of plans are interdependent. You can imagine that something's being done, it's being done by a functional team, but it goes towards a cross-functional or a product type OKR. So you basically had to copy and paste or you refer to it, but you need to develop these things in tandem and collaborate. And what you're really doing here is making sure that as the OKR owner, we've got all the teams lined up, we have the resources, they've committed to doing it, they have a plan, we reviewed it, we think the plan is okay, right? If you're a functional leader, you want to make sure that your teams have the right things to be doing. They know what they're going to be doing. They know how to attack the things. They know what they're responsible for. They're aware of the OKRs and all that sort of stuff, right? So this is the plan. When you do this, you write this down. As I say, I'm not an expert at planning, but the thing that I think you need to do is write down 4 things. Plan is what you'll do in what order, how long it's going to take, and how much resources. Like, we're going to do this kind of thing. We're going to hire these people. We're going to improve this piece of software. It's going to take about 2 weeks or 6 weeks or 3 sprints or whatever it is for 4 people, right? Or whatever we think we're going to take. And you kind of need just that high level project thing. Sort of imagine this more like an epic if you're a software developer type, more like an epic than a user story. Don't go down to the detailed level here. We're looking at big chunks, like multiple week chunks of work. Maybe we say we've got 3 people working 20% each on processing tickets, right? That's what we're doing for the quarter, and that's what they do, and they process an average of 20 tickets a day, right? Then you want to add up all the resources. Now, this is particularly important if you're a resource manager, like you're a line manager, you have a team that you're managing here. You want to make sure that you've not over-allocated things, and you want to do something here to figure out resources over time. Am I double counting things? So sometimes this might be best done as a graph or a visually sort of thing. Gantt charts, some people love Gantt charts. I hate them, but they can be very useful. Sometimes you just need a little spreadsheet or a table. Sometimes you can just do it in text and look at it, right? Just don't overcomplicate it. Then list out the biggest risks. There will be risks. There will be unknowns. What are they? List them out. And Yanal, you are not a lawyer. You don't need to describe the risks perfectly and cover your ass with everything. All you're wanting to do is highlight where the landmines are. Where are the problems here? Where are the things that are most likely to go wrong? Just the top 3, 4, 5 of them, right? You don't need the list of everything, and we may have an earthquake, right? And then the projection. Now, if this is particularly the case, if you are in a more operational team, like something that's more mature, where you can project usefully where the leading indicators or milestones are. But even in some cases, you might be able to say, if we're on track, we should be able to have this type of thing done by then, or by that stage, we'll have gone from 20 a day tickets to 25 a day tickets, right? So I would like to share an example with you. And this is an example I made up. Now, I will emphasize again, I'm not a great planner, but it's not my topic. Really, it's not something I'm good at, but I'm going to share this with you anyway. If I can find it, Google Chrome and planning example. That's it. There you go, onboarding scene plan. So I've done 2 plans here. One, and when you're reading this, like this is not like saying this is an idealized plan. This is something that I spent less than an hour to put together in an abstract concept, right? So for my onboarding team, I have a team of people who onboard clients, right? We take new clients and we do some work with them. We set up their account. We give them the right access. Whatever we do, send them to the training, do something like onboarding, right? Like many organizations do. And by our key result is to increase the number of clients onboarded per day from 250 to 600. Now, obviously here, this is completely in the abstract. We're just making this stuff up. But let's imagine we've got this is a typical kind of key result. You can imagine this is in a very operational team, right? So I've written down my plan. Here's my plan. I'm going to hire, onboard, and train 3 more people by date. Let's be more specific here. Let's say by week 7, right? Now I'm using this in a generic sense because even in real life, I probably have an actual date there. So unless I use weeks, maybe you'd use calendar weeks. Increasing the operations team size from 5 to 8 and clients onboarded from 250 to 400. Estimated hiring effort is included in business as usual, as in we already spend some time hiring. We don't think that the effort required to do the hiring and the interviewing is going to affect our process, right? Increase the clients onboarded per day from 50 to 75 by doing these things. And then what I might do is make this like that. Improve the processing tool to reduce processing time by 10%. That's a software team A commitment, and they VTA that at week 5. That's what they're saying. Now, I've written the word commitment here, right? So obviously, right, I have had a conversation with them and I've gone through this and we've understood that that's what they think they can do and that's when they think they can do it by. Now, maybe we have a debate with them and when they review this again, they say, oh, we're not going to do week 8, it's going to be week 9. Fine, whatever. At least I can edit this. Improving our client service, self-service documentation to reduce support requests from 1.8 per client to 0.5 per client, right? We'll do this by addressing top 7 support request types covering 80% of support requests. Internal commitment, we estimate half a person effort for 4 weeks, right? So now what I'm saying here is that I've done some research. I've looked at this and I know that we have these requests come in. I've looked at the top 80% of these support requests and the 7 of them, and those 7, we think that they're actually client of self-services. So we've done some analysis already. We've done this either in the OKR planning process or last quarter or sometime. Reviewing our workflow to identify breakpoints where onboarding gets stuck and addressing the best ones. Now, this is obviously something that I haven't done, right? I think that this is likely to be a good thing, but I don't know much about it. So I think this is going to be about half a person effort for 8 weeks, right? Now, this is obviously something that's pretty vague, right? Because I don't know what I'm doing. That's okay. I'm writing it down because that's my plan. That's where I'm up to. That's what I know. The resources I need in total is 5 plus 3 operations headcount approved, right? So we've got to go and check finance with that. Finance, right? Or HR or whoever we do in our organization. Allocate half a senior client onboarder. So half of my person, I've got the weird name. I can't remember what the title should be because I don't manage these teams. For a full quarter, reducing onboarding capacity by 25 a day for that period. So to do this, I'm actually going to reduce my capacity in order to deliver this because I've said here it's half a person effort for 4 weeks and 8 weeks. So I think that that's basically going to reduce to them by 25 a day. And that's the cost that I'm having here, right? So I'm just writing that down. Now, one could argue that this isn't systematic enough, but whatever, it's written down. It's a plan. It's there. We can iterate on this. Risks. Hiring has been challenged lately and 3 people by, what did I say, week 7? Week 7 is ambitious. We don't know where the opportunity of the workflow is, but suspect that it's there due to anecdotal evidence. We feel like it's there, but we don't know what it is. And a 0.5 person effort might be unpredictable and time may not be accurate. So I'm not particularly confident that this is going to be enough, right? So I'm just saying, don't know if this is enough, but this is what we're going to do, right? This is our plan of attack. And then my projection, because this is an operational team, I can basically say 50 a day per person. I know that, and I can take it down. So I can say week 1, we'll go to 225 a day By week 4, we should be at 280 a day because we'll have improved our self-service docs, if that works. And by week 6, we should have 300 a day. I think I've got that calculation wrong. So let's make it 330 a day, processing tool, and then add 3 more staff, we should be at 500 a day, and then 600 a day because of the workflow project improvements. That's what I think we should be at. That's my plan, right? Now that means that where I can use this as a sort of guide, as in, did I really get the benefit that I thought I would get from my client self-service docs once I'm doing it? As I start doing it, am I getting the benefit? So that's basically my projection. Now, what this means is that when I'm reviewing this with people, they can get an understanding of what am I trying to do and how is this going to look? And someone can say, look, I really don't believe that this is going to work. This is reviewing your workflow. I don't think you've got the right answer. I think you're going to need more people's effort. I think that's actually 2 persons' effort, whatever it is. Or how do you think you want to do that? Let's spend some time on this. So, okay, because we're going to spend some time on this, we need to add a step in here to do the review and maybe separate this out. So we do the review up here, right? Now, I've done another plan here for a product team. And this is a typical key results for a product team. We might have increased the conversion rate from 1.5% to 1.9% for the checkout team, right? The plan that I have is integrate PayPal as a payment method. We estimate 1 sprint and a 0.2% increase. Review the inline account sign-up process and optimize fields. Estimate 2 sprints, 0.1% increase. I'm getting more effort, lower benefit. Audit the edge cases and error conditions and implement corrections for checkout process. Estimate 4 sprints and 0.1% increase. Now, clearly we've done some research. We've looked at this a little bit. We've got some ideas about this. Maybe I don't want to expand this plan to have a little bit more detail there, but it's not bad. Risks, we have little understanding of what the effort or impact for steps 2 and 3 are. I haven't here, by the way, put anything about resources, right? In this particular version of this plan. Now, what I could do that, but maybe I don't need it in this case. Maybe I don't particularly have other external resources and I'm just going with the resources I have in my team, right? The 3 people or whatever I have. Projections, I'm confident we can hit 1.7% by the end of the year. 1.9% seems very risky. So I'm confident about the PayPal improvement, right? Right, because we know PayPal demand and effort. Well, 1.9% seems very risky, right? So we don't think we're going to get to that 1.9% because we have lots of unknowns there. So I'm pointing this out. So when people review this, they can see where my risks are, they can see what I'm trying to achieve. My team can review this and say, PayPal is actually much more complicated than you think because of blah, 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 right? Or here's another one, launch demo iOS app by the conference in week 7, right? I've got week 7 here again. The mobile team plan is to evaluate and select a framework to use. These are the candidates for 1 week. Get a skeleton app up and running with functioning sign up and login 3 weeks. Format the demo pages for mobile usage 3 weeks, but we need support from the content team. And it's not committed, right? So here I have a gap. That's really interesting. At least I've written it down. Integrate the demo pages into the app 1 week time once we've got the format, and then launch for beta testing 1 week, right? Which that's what I think it is. So 1 + 3 + 1 + 1 is 5 weeks. I'm ready before week 7. That looks good. I can look at this and sort of see if this plan goes well, we're ahead, as long as I get this work done by the other team and as long as 3 weeks is accurate. Risks, all the dates are very tight. We haven't done this before. Mitigation, we may need to severely limit the demo pages we selected. And we don't yet have commitment from content team, right? That's the biggest risk, actually. So let's shift that up to the top. Oh, what's happened there? Shift that up to the top. Okay, so Google is formatting that oddly. I don't know why it's formatting it like that. Fine. Okay, there we go. Now we've got it on 1 page. So you can see I've got some risks here. I've got plan and risks. What I haven't got is any projections, right? Because I've got my plan is basically milestones, and I haven't got resources because I've listed it there, but probably I should add resources, need this content team. But I've said enough of it. I don't need to say it again and again and again. I've got it clear enough in here that that's the problem. Okay, so that's an example of a plan. Now, these plans, I'm not saying these plans are excellent. They're not excellent plans. They're just plans. They're a starting point. And what's important for this is that I haven't spent a huge amount of time on them. I haven't spent like months and months on these. I'm not massively attached to them. If I need to change them, I can change them. So we go after we've done that. We've got this plan. We've got some ideas about this, about what we want to do. And by the way, when you're going through doing this, you might do this yourself for just 1 hour. But the best thing to do, obviously, is to collaborate with the team doing the work, the actual people doing the work, and just get some feedback from them. But certainly, that's the very first. What's the word? I'm going to change this to there. So the very first team you should review with, right? And let's get to this review process here, right? So we should review with the team that that is doing the work. That's critical, obviously, right? So we review with the team that's doing the work. Now, what I've done here is I've put this. Oops, I've got this little diagram here. You can see it looks like a robot, but it's supposed to be a slightly edited organizational chart. So there's you in blue, right? You've got something. You've got a team doing some work. You're obviously going to get them to review it, review this idea, review this plan, right? You're going to get your peers. So you're doing a 360 review. You're doing your peers. Now, why are you getting your peers to do this? These might be teams that they might be stakeholders. They might be dependencies. They might just be people on your team as a leader. Whoever it is, you're doing this because you want them to be engaged in this process. You want them to care about what you're doing. You want some input. You want some help. And you review it with your management. Clearly, you would also review with any stakeholders and things like that. You might do this progressively. But the purpose of this review process is, number one, improve the plan, right? Is there anything missing in this plan? Do I need to change anything? Have I missed a risk, right? Number two, align dependencies. Make sure that if we're depending on you, you know that we're depending on you and that you're committed to doing this. Commit the resources. So we're committing our resources, you're committing your resources. We've resolved this. Now, what might happen when you're doing this is you might identify that there aren't resources they would be committed. That content team might be committed to 10 other things that they can't do, and then they can't do your product. Now, what happens? You then have to escalate this through management and say, well, we don't have the resources because we can't get the product team to do the content team to do this work. So now what? That's now a problem that between you and the content team or management, someone needs to resolve this. But there's no point in going through and trying to launch a product that depends on someone who's not going to do the work, right? But you're trying to surface this early. So that's identifying problems, especially with resources and dependencies, but also problems with I don't think that when you say you're going to do this in 2 weeks, I don't think that's realistic. Why do you think 2 weeks? Or I think it's going to take more effort than that. Or I think that's not possible. Or I think you need to do this in a different order, or whatever it is. You're getting this second pair of eyes. And this is why you need to make this a straw man. You need to make it something that you're comfortable editing it. You haven't put your heart and soul into this plan. You've just put something together and now we're getting some editing. What's happening here is we're engaging with our colleagues, with our management and with our teams, potentially other stakeholders as well. You're engaging with them and they become part of this plan, right? They become part of executing it. They know about what's happening, right? So they know what your work is and what you're actually trying to achieve. And they'll help you. Now, one of the tips that I want to give you on this is when you're doing a review, and in fact, when you're writing the plan, resist executing the plan while reviewing, right? So resist solving the problems. If you find a problem, sometimes you can solve the problem by changing the plan. Like there's a problem here, let's shift this order or let's add a step in, right? But instead, normally the thing you want to do is make sure that you're adding a step in. You say, okay, that's a problem. We need to add a step at the start of the plan to resolve that problem, right? And then you will be resolving that problem, and part of that will then be after you resolve that problem, go and change the plan. You've changed the plan. Now, what you want to do is to make sure you're doing that as opposed to, I've written the plan, now we reviewed it, and now we have to do 3 weeks of work before we can start working on the plan, right? Because we have to do the work to solve all of the problems of the plan before we begin. That's the opposite of agile, right? That's being really, that's basically institutionalized analysis paralysis. Don't do that. So you want to try and if you find these problems, if you can solve them quickly, solve them quickly. Get the resources aligned, get the key result changed, whatever you're doing. But otherwise, put that step into the plan to solve that particular problem and make sure you're investing the time because that is the work. That is the actual work you're trying to do. Now, one of the things that often comes up when I'm talking to people about this, when I'm talking to my clients about this kind of thing is this whole process. When should I do this? Ideally, you should do this during the OKR setting process because that helps you set much better OKRs because often enough you have to go back and adjust the OKRs. But if you haven't done that and you've got OKRs, maybe they've been given to you, maybe you've just set them rapidly and you haven't gone through this process, that's fine. Do it now. Go and do it. And life will go on. The OKRs themselves, sure, it's best not to change OKRs because there's an overhead in changing them. There's an overhead in changing everything, right? But with the plan, you're sort of it's intentional to change and you want to change it frequently. With OKRs, you want to change them not very frequently, but sometimes you have to and life will go on. So the point is, whatever state you're in, if you haven't got a plan, put the plan together because that enables you to change. Okay. Now you have the third step is the weekly meeting. Yeah, you do want to do this every week, very frequently. And I always think with a weekly meeting, it's weekly is a little bit too much, which is perfect, right? And the purpose of this is that, If it's not frequent enough, it's every 2 weeks and then someone misses one or two of them, or you have to cancel one because of something, now you've got 4 weeks. And it's a long, long time. That's a third of a quarter. When it's weekly, it's always a little bit too frequent. But what that means is that you should start to get efficient at this. You should start to improve the process, and you should have existing familiarity with things. Now, the other thing is that it fits nicely into the rhythm of a week. We have a weekend, and then Monday morning we arrive and we start work with our weekly meeting, and we go through this process. Now, what we're doing in this weekly meeting is we're reviewing, we're not looking at the objectives and the key results and going through them all and seeing where are we on this number and that number and what are we doing about it, because we have a plan. So we want to review the progress on the plan. We want to review the plan, what's the next, and what problems or learnings, what have we learned about this. And now what you can do is do this by email. You can send this kind of thing around so that everyone can read it at the start. But if you do that, allocate some time at the start of the meeting for everyone to read everyone's updates. Literally, has everyone read everyone's updates? Do you need more time? We have 5 minutes to read updates. Go and read the updates. Make sure you've read them all. Now, when you're sharing these updates, and I think there's another step to this, which is the end of week review, the retrospective, which is where you create the updates. And when you're sharing these updates, make sure you're being really efficient with them. There's no point in sort of listing out all of the things that your team has done. We're not making a record of all of the stuff that you're doing and trying to boast about how many things we've done. We're just trying to explain we are on track. We've made some progress on this. We've run into this kind of problem with the skeleton app, right? We don't know what to do with this. We're behind on doing that. We couldn't hire these people. We have this problem. We're just trying to make sure that everyone has enough information to have a useful discussion about the things that really matter. No point in saying we launched this feature and that feature and the other feature and those user stories and these user stories, whatever. We've done some things. We're on track. We are not on track. We have some problems. We've learned some things. We learned that the thing that we're trying to do with this particular feature, it doesn't work because we did the A/B test and it had no results. Whatever it is, we're trying to share that kind of thing. So share that information. That can be in an email, it can be in Slack or whatever you need to do. But make sure you have time to read it. Now, the discussion you want to have and what you want to make sure this meeting is about is primarily about the forward-looking discussion, which is, are we on track? Do we have any problems? Where do we need to focus? So where's the biggest problem we need to focus on? And then when you're looking at any activities we're doing, any things we're doing, how do these things help? Are we doing the right things? Like looking at the plan and looking at the next week's plan, are we doing the right things? Are these still the right things? Do we need to change our plan? Is there a better way? How do we know? Do we have the right signals? Are we looking at the right metrics? Now, frequently enough, it's a good idea to integrate with this meeting also the weekly KPI review, especially if you have some form of operating system, some sort of system or an operational team. Review your KPIs, review them on a regular basis and ask the same questions. Like go through this, are we doing the right things here? Do we have any problems with this? And that may help you keep the lights on and manage business as usual, but it also helps inform how your OKR work's going, because sometimes you'll be doing something that you think is going to increase conversion rate, but because you have KPIs that you're checking various things, you might discover that when you're looking into the KPIs, we discover some other pattern here that's causing a change, right? So it's useful to do this at the same time. And then finally, you want to ask, should we change anything? Should we be making a difference? Should we course correct? And now, one of the things to do with this is to make sure that you're having the discussion. This is a review and planning meeting. It's not a problem-solving meeting. So sometimes, just like when you're doing that review of the plan, you might solve the problem in the meeting with 2 or 3 minutes to conversation, 5-minute conversation. But most likely, it's a bigger problem than that. And what we need to do is allocate time and people to say, you and you and you, or you and me and that person over there, we need to get together with the head of marketing for an hour and solve the problem. Let's take an action to set up that meeting on Tuesday, right? Or set up that meeting this afternoon and make sure it happens. What we're doing here is planning. We're creating momentum and we're making sure we're doing the changes that we need to do. Sometimes that may mean communicating out to a larger team. So when we make a change, we say, you know what, we're not going to do that feature anymore, or we're going to change the way that feature works, or we're not going to hire 3 people, we need to hire 5 people now, right? Means the action is get finances approval or HR's approval. And then let's start that process. Let's tell people we're going to interview more people, right? So you've got to trigger off that. At the end of the week, so that's the start of the week. And then you're going through the process and you're still working with your teams on this. You're still working with them oh, look at this. I've actually got something behind there you couldn't see. I'll move myself. Dig deep. I do say here dig deep. And the reason I say dig deep is because you actually do want to dig deep into the causes of the problems. Like I do say, don't overdo the problem solving, but do dig deep into what's causing this so that you're allocating and planning the right changes and the right meetings to solve the problem, like allocating the right things. You don't just want to say, we have a problem and leave it at that. Figure out what's the next step. Make sure you have a next step for every problem. I'll put myself back up there now. Okay, so you're doing this, you go through the week, and you probably, because of this, you now have a series of extra changes and extra activities to do during the week. And as a leader involved in this, whether you're cross-functional or functional or CEO, whatever it is, you may be involved in some of those steps, and you may be just wanting to check in on certain ones of them. Some of them might want a checkpoint or a result quicker than the end of the following week. That's fine. Make sure you're doing that. And that helps you keep in touch with what's actually happening in your team, which means that you're able to do performance reviews, you're able to understand them, you're able to manage them and lead them well, as opposed to being sort of a distant person. So at the end of the week, you want to do a weekly review. This is capturing the problems and the wins. Now, what you need to do here is make sure that you're reviewing the progress plans and problems. When I say review, what I mean is collect. Here, use this by email or Slack. This is where you can put this together ready for the next week. People should write this down at the end of the week when it's fresh in their mind. Spend 10 minutes, write down what did we do, what was the problem, what was our biggest learning, right? And share that. Now, you can put this into a retrospective meeting and then take this into a retrospective and have a stop, start, continue discussion. That can be very useful. But the primary reason for this is to set yourself up for success next week. Make sure you have a cap to the week. We've ended. That's what happened. This is the progress. This is where the problems are. This is where the pain points are. We're going to need to solve these problems. So make sure we put that into the comments or the progress plans and problems discussion for the Monday morning meeting. All right. As I say, retrospectives can help. If you're the kind of team who does retrospectives, I think retrospectives are one of the most useful things you can do because they enable you to improve your own process and just look back at, is this process working? Are we getting the right data? Are we having the right discussions? What do we need to do differently? I do sometimes find that retrospectives can be a bit over the top depending on how people are doing things. So I like to keep it simple with a stop, start, continue. It's just discussion about the actual problems. If you want to have a boat and the drawings and so on, go ahead and do that. Doesn't float my boat, but it might float yours. So do what you want. But then the other thing to do with this is to make sure that in this process, we're not just focusing on pains and negatives and problems, we're also collecting wins. Just collect the wins, put them in an email and collect them together, send them on Slack, wherever they go. And that then feeds into the weekly recognition. Now, this is really important to build morale and to sort of celebrate what happened during the week. We're not ending the week of, everything sucked and we had problems. We're also going to celebrate the wins and share the learnings. Have some beer, wine, orange juice, pizza, hummus, nuts, whatever you need, like whatever works for your team. If you don't have food, if you're not a food and drink team, then don't do food and drink. Don't just have a virtual beer or whatever you do, but do something that sort of helps people sort of unwind. Celebrate the wins. We did this. We won that. We solved this problem. We delivered this feature. Whatever we did, we've discovered some problems. We've discovered something new. We want to share the learnings. This is where to share the learnings. It's not a problem-solving meeting. It's not a commiseration meeting. It's just I learned that this isn't working because customers do that instead of this. It's amazing. And hence the idea is to end the week on a positive. Now, you're doing this because you have this rhythm. And as a leader, one of your goals is to set the rhythm of execution. And the rhythm is, here's a week. We're going to start. Here are our problems. Here's what we're trying to do. Let's focus on the things we need to solve. Focus on the problems we need to fix. Let's look at our plans, change our plans, adapt, right? Learn and adapt. And then we're doing the work. And then at the end of the week, we've executed well. Well done. Job well done. Go and have a relaxing weekend, right? In some cases, some rare cases, it might be come back on Saturday because we've got to do some more work. But most likely it's go and have a relaxing weekend, come back next week. We've got some more work to do. But I mean, we've done a good job. Well done. Okay, so that's the weekly recognition. That's the end of my my presentation on this. But I'd like to just sort of just revive. Actually, what I should have done is had that first slide again. Just to review this again, the 5 steps basically: do the plan, review the plan, and iterate and socialize it. Those 2 steps can happen while you are developing your OKRs. They can happen after you developed it. If you haven't done them halfway through the quarter, do them now. Just do this. Write down a plan. It's not a heavy duty process. Write it down. Iterate and socialize it. Get your input from people. Do this weekly meeting. Because you're having a weekly meeting with people you have reviewed the plan with, they're already familiar with it. They already know. They're already engaged. They care. They have some understanding of where the problems are. They might have some opinions. but now it's part of their problem as well. So they're having to solve this. Now this week, by the way, that weekly meeting, you can involve your peers and management and other people in that. It can be a really good time to get exposure for your team to senior people and to stakeholders as well, and get their input and get their engagement on how do we course correct. It provides a really good, if you are a senior person and you're invited to one of these meetings, it's sometimes hard to go to many of them, but going along is a really good place for offering coaching and advice and leadership and guidance. At the end of the week, do the review and then celebrate, recognize what you've done, and then start the thing again. That weekly cycle, the weekly meeting, the review, and the recognition is really important. And in that weekly meeting, somewhere in that meeting, we need to make sure also you look at the KPIs. It could be a separate meeting for KPIs or whatever. Of course, during the week, we're doing the work. We're doing the work that we expected to do, and we're doing the work that we planned in the weekly meeting. Okay, so that's the secret to execution. And as you're doing this, if you're going through this process and executing like this, generally by the end of the quarter or by halfway through the quarter, you do your half-quarter check-in and you're pretty familiar with what's happening here. It's not a difficult thing to understand what's happening, but it's the quarterly check-in becomes more of a process of, so are we really doing the right things here? And it's not so much how are we going? It's not like a progress report. It's literally, are we doing the right things? And is our strategy right? And then when you come to setting the OKRs, you've got this familiarity, this deep familiarity with what are we doing, where the problems are, and how's it going. When it comes to annual performance reviews and people interactions and like coaching teams, you are involved with the team and you know what's happening. And that means you can actually deliver this coaching and feedback more competently and add more value to your teams. So that's what my recommendation for execution, how to go about execution. I hope this is helpful for you. Please feel free to drop a comment in. I don't know right now. The way this works, I don't get to see who's looking or how many people are looking or whether there's anyone looking or anything like that. So I just can't tell. But hopefully you're seeing this and you're able to add a comment. Feel free to add a comment anywhere. I look forward to seeing it. And I will get back to you if the comment's there and I haven't seen it. Just add the comment anyway. I'll get back to you later on, and either by message or something like that. What I do, in case you're wondering, I help companies with OKRs. I help them with execution and I help them with strategy. Now, what this is all about, usually my customers have decided that they want to implement OKRs. Usually my customers are growth stage startup executive teams, usually with a team of about 50 to 500. They've frequently raised a recent funding round, maybe Series A through D, often B or C. Normally not later than that, normally not earlier than that, because if you're earlier, you're in that discovery mode and it's a little different. Okay, I've got some comments here from Lucas and Stephen. Hello, great to see you guys. We are looking at an amazing presentation. Thanks very much, Lucas. Stefan Duitzman, this was very valuable. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much, Stefan. I really appreciate that. Okay, it's always nice to hear. It's very hard to know whether I'm talking to nobody or not. What I do is I help executive teams with those processes, and usually what's happened is that they've decided that OKRs are the way they're doing it. Sometimes they're already using OKRs, but they're not getting the results they want. And what I do is I help people use OKRs not by perfecting OKRs and getting the perfect OKRs, but by structuring it around understanding what your strategy is, what you're trying to do, what your focus is, how to focus and how to get the right results, how to engage your teams, and how to execute. And this process, what's really happening here is that OKRs are a great framework for building all of this execution now on. Simply setting OKRs is not going to get you the results. Simply going and saying, how are we doing with our OKRs this week is not going to get you a great result. So that's why I spend most of my time on the execution process and how to engage teams, and on the planning and strategy process here of how to actually make sure we're doing the right things. So if you're interested in that, if you find that useful or interesting, if you find if you'd like to talk to me about things, I do engage with teams who have already had you have been using OKRs, and we would normally do a OKR retrospective to start off with to see what needs to change. I do engage with teams who've heard of OKRs and are interested in doing it, and I do engage with teams who don't have a strategy and ones who do have a strategy. And occasionally I engage with larger teams as well. Now, I do have a couple of questions here that I'm going to put on the screen. I'm not sure, can I put them on the screen? I'm using a different tool here, and I don't know how to put it on the screen. No, I can't do that. It goes black, doesn't it? Okay, that's no good. Right, okay. So clearly I've got you there, but I can't see what you've written on the screen there. So what I'll do is I'll read out the question. It's from Lucas Fernandez. Question, you presented a weekly schedule, but what would be the longest cycle you advise? So typically, I advise for most organizations to go with a quarterly OKR per cycle. And the reason for this is because quarterly is long enough that you can get some big things done. You can have some impact, but it's not so long that, especially like a whole year, it's so easy with a whole year to go, oh, it's February, March, but we're kind of a little bit off track, but don't worry, we'll catch up in December. And then December comes around, oh gosh, it's December already and we can't do it and everyone's on holiday. So a quarterly cycle is really good. It also, for two reasons. One is because the timeline is really good for people to actually get things done, but not so long that you lose the urgency. And the second thing is that quarterly cycle of resetting your OKRs enables you to have a check-in and go, so where are we and where are we trying to go? Now, if you're a more mature company, and I know, I think you're working at a large organization, if I recall. In more mature companies, especially at the company level, like Google, for example, sets annual company OKRs. And that's because as a company, when you're they're 100-something thousand, 200,000 person company, but even at the multiple thousand person company, your strategy, your process, and your goals don't necessarily change year on year within the year that much. Within an organization, within a smaller startup or a group within there, frequently you do learn things faster. But with a larger organization, your communication overhead is high. So you might want to have just an annual OKR cycle. With a team of like a couple of hundred people, quarterly is fine. And you often roll over a key result, an objective especially, or a key result might roll over with some changes to the numbers from quarter to quarter. And that's fine because you're still trying to achieve the same thing. It's just you've got some progress and the goalposts have moved a bit, and that's fine. Or you might have completely new key results or completely new objectives, and that's fine too, as long as it's the right thing to be doing for your organization. Especially with starting out, I do recommend quarterly because you then don't have to worry too much about having got the wrong OKRs. You've got them wrong, but that's okay. We'll learn and we'll change and we'll adapt during the quarter. At the end of the quarter, we'll set new ones, and we don't have to be beholden to, we've set these for a whole year, we've got to stick to them, and you have that existential question. So that's one thing. The second thing, the other part of this question, I think, is actually where you may be focused on is the execution cycle. Again, I do recommend weekly simply because we have a weekend, right? And so it's a really sensible week. Now, if you're in an organization that has sprints and your sprints are 2 weeks long, stick with a sprint. Like maybe that's the most useful thing to do. It's the same question as how long should your sprint be, right? I don't think that having it shorter than a sprint is that helpful. Shorter than a week is that helpful. I have seen people do this kind of thing on a daily basis, and it's probably too much. My view is that you want to try to link it in with the natural cycles, but also make it just a little bit too frequent so that you develop that familiarity, and so that if you miss one, there's no drama. Stephen Duitzman, I first encountered OKRs in my last role. I'm still unsure about the best way to measure if a proposed OKR is going to be impactful enough. That's an interesting question. And I think that that's in many ways the $64 million question, right? How do you know if this is going to be impactful enough? And the truth is that you don't. And it's the same with strategy, with business strategy. Here's the thing. In business and in management and the things we're doing, we're often not 100% certain that it's going to be, that we're doing the right thing. We have to make a judgment call on something. Some things are opinion-based. Some things we do a lot of research to make sure we're doing the right thing. And it depends what kind of scope you're in and what you're trying to achieve when you're doing this. So it's hard to know. The thing to think about here is, does this OKR move me towards my strategy, achieving my strategy? Is this going to help? Is this output going to help? The second question is, does this OKR, this objective, this key result, does this clarify for my team the problem they should be working on and the scope of their responsibility? Now, this really depends very much on the level of the maturity of your team and even the type of team you have. In a very immature, young or fresh team, or sometimes a very operational team, you have to be quite explicit about what you need to get done and what the target is. In a very senior team, you need to give them quite a lot of room to move, but you need to be specific enough to keep this focused on the strategy. Now, I tell this story quite frequently about, and you might see it on some of my other videos about South Park, which is, in fact, I may even have the slides right here, because I'll tell this story because it's a good story. Where is it? There it is. So South Park, in South Park, there was this episode about 20 years ago, and the boys had all their underpants going missing. So they stayed up late one night to see where their underpants were going, and they found these gnomes were stealing underpants and taking them to this big underground cavern, right? And they had all these gnomes running around carrying underpants. And what are you doing here? Well, collecting underpants is our business. What do you mean it's your business? Well, collecting underpants is just phase one. Well, what's phase two? Does anyone know what phase two? No one knew what phase two is. But okay. Well, but phase three is profit. And so what happened here is that they had this collecting underpants, this activity they were doing. They didn't know what the middle bit was, and the output was profit. What we tend to do, the error that we make with OKRs is going too far down this activity route where it's like being really specific. You do need to do that for very junior people. You need to be quite specific about what you're doing, about what problem you're solving and what the domain is and all that sort of stuff. But often we go too far the other way and we say, well, our goal is to make this much profit or that much revenue or collect this many customers. But it doesn't tell me enough about what the strategy is to know whether what I'm doing is going to be complementary or not. Sure, I can do things that will generate profit. And I had one customer that I worked with where the CEO did not want to specify the goal. It was the only goal they had was we're going to increase return on equity from X to Y. And the 8 executives had 10 different ideas of how to do this and they couldn't agree, and it was just impossible. So you need to do the work to clarify what the strategy is, like what's our opinion on how we're going to win and what value is, and then we make sure that our OKRs help us to go towards that, and make sure they're specific enough for our teams to be engaged, to understand and focus, and broad enough for our teams to be fully engaged. If you give a really specific goal to a senior team, they'll just start switching off and I've had enough collecting underpants. I'm going to go and do something more useful. Okay, I use the collecting underpants, by the way, as like a way of talking about the activities, the tasks, that micromanaging approach. Last question from Lucas here. So I think we run out of time after that. Although if you have another question, just drop it in, we'll be fine. I missed the beginning of the presentation, but a lot about OKR is about cascading OKR along the organization. In your example, you show a challenging of the plan by the teams. This is excellent, but stop the cascading. Am I missing something? Would you stop OKR at the middle management level? Great question, Lucas. So my view on OKRs is that you shouldn't cascade. And the way I like to think about this is that OKRs are a management tool, and especially at the company level, you want to have company OKRs. Now, where else do you have OKRs? The OKRs don't need to match management. They don't need to match the organizational chart. It's not the case that you have to be just like, you don't have to, just because you're a manager, have a set of OKRs, right? OKR is really about leadership, and leadership sometimes happens at different parts of the organization. So think about where there's something I can really add by having another set of OKRs, right? So as a product manager, I might not have a team, but I probably want to have some OKRs for my product. That's pretty important normally. As a functional manager, like if a software engineering lead, potentially I want some OKRs about how we improve our software game. But for the most part, I'm delivering the OKRs that are part of the company or part of the product OKRs that I'm supporting. Right? I don't necessarily need my own OKRs. The OKRs that I might set might be representative of 10% of my work, right? Most of my work is delivering the objectives and key results of the products that we're building, which is set in conjunction with the product manager. So it's not my OKRs as an engineering leader. So here's the thing. What should happen in the ideal world is you set a strategy at the top level. You set some OKRs based on that strategy, right? And you share those, at least at the draft level. You get people to review the plans. Different people in different parts of the organization now set their own OKRs, right? Ideally, using this planning cycle, you write down your OKR, you write down your plan, you review it with your colleagues and people around the place along with your OKRs, and you get this feedback from them and you iterate a little bit, but you want to do that all together. So what you don't want to do is have OKRs set at the top. Now the next level sets their OKRs. Now the next level sets their OKRs. And then we wait. What are their OKRs? Okay, now I'll set my OKRs. And what's happening here is we have the multiplication of too many OKRs, and someone who's like 4 levels down, they have 4 layers of OKRs, plus they have some stakeholder OKRs they've got to support and a product OKR over here. And they're like, now I've got like 55 OKRs. What do I do? It creates more problems than it solves. So number one, don't have too many OKRs. But number two, as soon as you start doing this, you have a 2-week delay between each set of OKRs. So management sets their OKRs at the start of the quarter. 2 weeks later, 2 weeks later, 2 weeks later, 2 weeks later, and now we're at the end of the quarter, and now I've just set my OKRs. And that happens so frequently. So don't do cascading. Don't wait for the next level. Just look at your organization. Look at what your team's role in the organization is. Decide, do I need to set specific OKRs? Am I trying to make a change, a big impact? As in my role, right? Do I need to gather people along, gather more people, whether it's my team or other people along, or can I use existing OKRs and say, all right, team, we're doing this objective and those key results and this objective and those key results for this manager and that stakeholder. Those are the things that we're worried about. That's what we're working on. I don't need to add a plethora of more OKRs to that. That's what we're doing. We can do that. We write the plan, and that's okay. All I need is to know what I'm trying to achieve and what success looks like. I don't need to redefine that. I can inherit, I can adopt it, I can inherit it, whatever it is, but I don't need to redefine it, and I certainly don't need to multiply the number of OKRs around the place. So that's my view. I don't think cascading is the right answer. So I hope that helps, Lucas. Feel free, if you want to have a chat, just drop me a line. We can have a chat about it. So feel free to have a chat about that. There are people who have a different view that cascading is the right thing, and what they tend to do, and this is the worst thing I've seen, is the worst way of doing it is basically, here's an objective, here are my key results, and now we inherit that key result to someone else, and that becomes their objective. And that's always terrible, because doing that means that the objective is usually inspirational, like saying, what are we trying to achieve, right? The key result defines success. So now we've got defining success, and it's kind of like this uninspiring, boring detail sort of metric thing, which is suddenly objective, and I'm breaking that down. And I end up with this like almost spreadsheet-like framework and inheritance of like multiply all these things together, and now, hey presto, out comes our OKRs. But where's the initiative? Where's the leadership? Where's the inspiration in this? Where's the clarity on what we are actually trying to achieve here? All we know is that we've all got a little cog in the wheel, and it's just not very inspiring, and it means that you can miss things very easily, because all you're doing is breaking things down, as opposed to looking at what the company's trying to achieve. How should I contribute best to that, and what do I do in my group? All right, hope that's helpful. Thanks very much for listening. Look forward to hearing from you. Feel free to drop another comments in the chat. And if you want to watch the replay, or Lucas, if you want to catch the start of this, or anyone wants to catch the start, it's available on YouTube straight away, and on LinkedIn. I think you can watch the replay on LinkedIn, but YouTube's usually the best place, because LinkedIn's not a great place for video, to be honest, apart from lives. But it works, and I also would take some clips out of this and post them on my YouTube as well, so you'll be able to see some clips. Thanks very much for listening. I hope to hear from you soon. Thanks for your time. Take care. Bye-bye.